Hello and welcome to Will's Infinite Library. I'm Will and this is my Infinite Library. Hello friends, happy 2024. It's been a while, so I wanted to kind of connect with you again, wish you a happy new year, and kick things off with at least a start. I don't know if it's going to be a great start or even a good start, but a start. You gotta start somewhere, right? So I wanted to kind of catch you up on where I've been since my last video, which was a very long time ago. I was in kind of a reading slump for a long time. Part of that was because I was doing some professional development and just didn't have time for reading. And when I did read, I was looking for kind of more escapist fiction, which isn't what I naturally gravitate to as much. So I always feel like I struggle to find what I'm looking for. So I started with The Name of the Wind because I wanted some pure like high fantasy escapist, like get me out of this world, give me some magic, let's just chill. This was in the summertime. I thought it'd be perfect. Heard so many good things about it, so I picked it up. Here it is. Here's The Name of the Wind, by Patrick Rothfuss. I think it's a duology at the moment. There's supposedly a third book that never comes out that's supposed to come out sometime. And I'm fine with that because I did not finish it. I tried multiple times. I stopped on page 372 eventually, which is around like 60% mark probably, something like that. It just did not, I could not get into it. It felt really, it was kind of like a love to hate it situation where like the book is so highly acclaimed, and on the back of the book there's some quote about how like it basically invented first person narration, which it didn't. Like people have done that before in fantasy and every other genre. It's just weird. I just don't get it. And I know a lot of people love it, and I'd like to say I see why, but I really don't. But I mean, that's my opinion, and in a genre I don't normally read, so I'm probably the outlier there. So no hate on the book itself, just on my kind of take on it was I didn't love it. And then I was thinking about, okay, what do I love again? Because, you know, I'm always searching, trying to find what I want to read. And I was like, I always go back to Tom Robbins books, of course. And I was like, what's like that that's coming out now? And I found a few examples of books people recommended. A lot of them I kind of bounced off of immediately, but one that like I was like, oh, this feels like I can see the through line was Christopher Moore. So I picked up several Christopher Moore books at book sales, and I bought one on Amazon actually, which was this one, which I think was his first book. They're supposed to be really humorous and fun and have kind of some more interesting, deeper elements as well, and be really quirky. So you can see that kind of through line with Tom Robbins. The one I liked the most was Sacre, Bleu, which is kind of a meditation on art and the color blue. But it was a bit too historical for my taste. I don't really love historical. I don't like going back in time. I like going forward in time if I have to go somewhere. And so I didn't quite love it. I read some of it. It's a beautiful book. It's actually printed in blue text, and it has art printed throughout it. Let me see if I can find a picture. Like as an example, like there's color photographs of famous artworks, and then like he goes through and like each of these has a place in the story. So it's a really cool book. Like it's just a beautiful hardcover copy here. I picked up for like a couple dollars at the book fair. But I didn't quite do it for me. So I made it like maybe a third of the way through. I also picked up Razmatazz, which was another one of his books, which kind of same story. It's a bit more historical for my tastes. Though I can see the humor and the fun in it. And then Practical Demonkeeping. I read a couple chapters and just couldn't get into it. I think I'm going to revisit this one soon because I'm going through and trying to like find books to read that are already on my physical TBR shelves, because that just makes sense, right? And also shorter books I'm prioritizing because I'm finding that I really like to just get through a book and read it and have that full experience. And if I have a struggle getting into it, which I almost always do, even with books I love, I can push through it a lot easier if it's a shorter book. So I think I'll revisit that one again soon. So stay tuned for an update on that. And then, because, my journey, I was like, let's just reread an actual Tom Robbins novel to get back into reading. So this was like late in the summer. I read Fierce Invalids, Home from Hot Climates. I've read this a couple of times, but it's probably the one I've read the least of his books. It's the one of the newer ones. And like looking back, I was like, I think that one, like he'd kind of lost steam by that point. It wasn't my favorite, but it was the first one I read actually. So I found a lot to love about it, a lot that I remembered, a lot that I didn't remember, and a lot that was really problematic. I think this was like published in the early 2000s, and there's some stuff in there I was like, oh no, uh, made me a little uncomfortable. So yeah, but a lot of really cool things, a lot of really fun, quirky things about it that I loved, and it was fun to just to get back into a book that I knew that I would enjoy and that I would get through. So that was a good experience, but then it threw me off again because I was like, how do I top that? So I kept looking for like, what are books like this? What are books that are quirky and weird and fun? Um, and I just didn't really find it. So I continued with my journey because I had, like, you can't just stop. So I looked for another weird book and I found this one, The Full Moon Whaling Chronicles, which is nothing like any of those other books, but it was really interesting. Again, I did not finish it, so you can see a common theme here. Maybe this should be like my DNF video, but it's written in poetic verse, and it's like a fantasy story about a whaling ship crewed by werewolves. And it's like in the kind of near future. There's a lot of weird technology, a lot of things where like verse just, it feels like it kind of controls what happens because it has to like flow poetically, which is interesting. And I really like those kind of, I don't know, I guess different constraints that writers put on themselves to create things that wouldn't have been created otherwise, really. But again, like I felt like I got it after 30 pages, 50 pages, that feels better. After 50 pages, and it kind of hurt my brain a little bit to read the way it was like so, like there were like hard rhymes and things like that, that I was having to like focus on the language and the story and the kind of weirdness of it all. But I felt like I enjoyed it, I got it, I like what the author is doing and that it's something really weird and unique and different, but I didn't need to read the whole thing. And this is kind of a thing that I'm realizing more and more as I like shorter books to see something new happening, but I don't need to read the whole thing if I feel like I get it early on. Like my enjoyment is in seeing what the author has done, how they've kind of pushed boundaries and tried something new. It's not in seeing how this plot plays out. If, like the really cool thing about the book is that it exists in the first place. So again, like trying to read different stuff. One thing that's been gripping me a lot lately is poetry. So I got this book, Time as a Mother by Vuong, which was really cool. I really loved it. I can't really talk much about it because it's poetry and I don't have the vocabulary to really talk about poetry, but it was really beautiful and painful and a lot about identity. And what can I say about it is that I think the themes are a little darker than what I typically gravitate to, because I do, like, while I struggle with escapist fiction, I do want things that like excite me and make me feel happy. So I don't usually gravitate towards those kind of themes, but I found more and more as I read it that it clicked with me because the language is so unexpected, I think, and unique, that I love when I read a line of poetry and I don't. And like it clicks with me and I'm like, oh, I love it, that's beautiful, but I don't quite understand it. And then I think about it and it kind of lives in my brain for a while and just kind of bounces around. And often it doesn't really take me anywhere, but I just enjoy the feeling of it bouncing around in there and the words and the rhythm and the flow of it. And I think that's what I love about poetry, is that it doesn't have to have like a meaning. It can just be, and you can feel it, and the words can have a power that you don't have to even really interpret consciously. Like I think maybe subconsciously the words resonate because language is so fundamental to how we think and see the world, and me specifically, and maybe you too as a reader. I think more than, I think everyone is that way, but I think us especially, we really see the world that way, and language has a really deep root in how we think, and on a subconscious level that we don't even have a clue about, unless you're a linguist, in which case maybe you know a lot about it. And then we're catching up to the present. So the next book I read was another one that was when I was researching books like Tom Robbins and recent recommendations. I found this one, Sterling Karat Gold by Isabel Waidner, which just the cover and like reading about it, it's like a queer modernist or postmodernist retelling of Kafka's The Trial, and it's just bizarre. There's time travel, there's spaceships, weird animals. They call, like, I think they're called like cutesy animals, and like this character, a lot of non-binary characters and characters of different sexualities and races, and it's kind of just about how minorities are like don't have a fighting chance, essentially. Like the system is just cracking down on you, and that you're going to be scrutinized, and they're going to come after you for literally just existing, like no matter what you do. So again, heavier themes, which are important to explore, and they're dealt with in a really weird, surreal way. And it also, I felt like I got it after like 30 to 50 pages, but I read the whole thing because it was shorter, and I was glad I did, and I was glad I could because it was shorter. I don't know if I would have, I wouldn't have, to be honest. If it was like 500 pages, I wouldn't have made it, but it's like under 200, I think. Yeah, it's under 200 pages. So I got through it. And this was one of the books that, like I've talked about before, I just see the cover or hear a short description and I'm like, that's my next favorite book. So like My Volcano was like that, The Melting Queen, Future Fish, or some from recent years. And this one was like that too. I was like, I saw it and I was like, I know I need to read this. It's not like I want to read it or like I should read it. Like I feel like a lot of books, but I was like, that's my next book. So I'm really glad that I read it. I didn't love it as much as I'd hoped to, but I felt like I needed to read it. Like it was a book that I needed to have read. And I think the only reason why I kind of struggled with it was the language was very kind of choppy. A lot of sentence fragments, which I like when they're mixed with longer sentences, but it was like a lot of them in a row, and like a lot of dropping pronouns and dropping, like, instead of saying like I'm going to the mall, it would be like going mall. And like, again, kind of like Full Moon Whaling Chronicles, it just kind of hurt my brain, and I felt like I was struggling against the language more than I wanted to be. So cool book, liked it. It didn't click with me super on the language level, but in terms of content and weirdness, loved it. And then next, and like I didn't know if I was going to talk about, oops, I just kicked my stand. I didn't know if I was going to talk about this because this is the book I'm reading now, and I DNF'd it a couple times, but I'm pushing through and starting to enjoy it more, which is Appleseed by Matt Bell. This is another one, not on the same level as those other ones that kind of called to me, but I read the description and thought it sounded really interesting. And I think part of the connection here is it was, again, looking for books like Tom Robbins books that, you know, that are just different and powerful. And I saw him posting on Twitter, I think back in the olden days when there was a Twitter, about rereading Jitterbug Perfume, and I was like, interesting. And then like I was reading about his recent novel Appleseed, and it's about a fawn, like Jitterbug Perfume has a fawn in it. So I thought this was interesting. Maybe this is going to scratch that itch. It's on an epic scale throughout history, like Jitterbug Perfume, but it's really more of a book about kind of like ecological disaster and humanity kind of destroying the earth and itself. Again, darker than what I want to read a lot of the time, because I'm like, I get it, that's the world we live in. It's important to deal with it and think about it, but I don't want to dwell on it when I don't have to. And it follows 3 characters throughout history. One is in the 1800s planting apple orchards in the frontier in Pennsylvania, I believe, in Ohio. One is in 50 years from now, in kind of the near future, with kind of eco-terrorists trying to dismantle the system that destroyed nature and fight back against the remnants of civilization. That's coming soon. And then the last one is like 4,000, 2,000 years in the future. 1,000 years in the future. It was really far in the future, with like this being that can like reprint its body and like exploring the world, looking for resources and information about the world, and then rebirthing itself and just keep searching on its own in this lonely, frozen world. So it's interesting. The writing, again, doesn't grab me, but the story does. So I'm interested to see how they all really connect. And the reason the writing in this one doesn't grab me, I think, is that it's very kind of formal and old school. Like, it feels like the kind of book that was like heavily influenced by the writers of the last generation, rather than kind of pushing forward in today's. I don't know. It's more, I guess it's more commercial than the language of like Sterling Karat Gold, which was really experimental, or the Full Moon Whaling Chronicles, or even Tom Robbins. I think that's it. It's just more traditional writing. So it's more about the content and the story than the language itself, which is perfectly fine. It's just, I wanted to hit on all the levels, so I was a little disappointed by that, but I think it's a good book. It's well written, it's interesting, and I will continue reading it. I don't know if I'll finish it, but at this point I think I've gotten about 100 pages in. I think I'll be able to push through. So that's what I've been reading. Before I forget, I did want to share with you these socks that my niece gave me for Christmas that say "Read with Pride." I don't know if you can see the bottom part. I was going to wear them for this video, but I was like, wait, if I wear it, you won't see it. So this is "Read with Pride." It has little hearts and rainbow books. So those are really cool. I'll maybe wear them for my next video. Even though you won't see them, you'll know I'm wearing them. And yeah, I'd love to hear what you've been reading. If you have any thoughts on any of the books that I talked about today, or just want to share what's going on with you, love to hear it in the comments below. Thanks again for hanging out with me, and I'm looking forward to talking about more books with you in 2024. Woo! See you next time.